Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. In this video, we've got Nick Viall from Viall Files podcast on with Jason Tartick from Trading Secrets podcast to discuss some finances. And I always love these conversations. It's sort of like real meta. It's not Bachelor focused in the sense that we're not going to be talking about hot gossip, but how the sausage is made behind the industry that is content creation. I'll add some thoughts on my end, but we also will see how Nick explains why he got a prenup. I completely agree with him. It seems like it makes a lot of sense, even though the term prenuptial agreement may have some negative connotations. I think, it's always good to have contracts in place. We'll listen to what he has to say. Follow me here for Bachelor Rush Hour, morning and afternoon. We had another hit morning episode, 10,000 downloads. That's where we're at right now. I want to double that. So if you watch my YouTube channel and have never checked out the podcast, the best way to support right now, the best way is to give the podcast a shot. It's different entertainment news. It's more on-the-go audio. You can listen to it in the car, and you can go find it morning and afternoon. I don't think there's a podcast that's more up-to-date on current events because we record it right before we air it. Bachelor Rush Hour. All right, let's jump into it. Here's several different clips of Nick being interviewed by Jason Tartick. Have a listen.
A little bit about your relationship with Love and Money, like with you and Natalie. Do you guys have any type of rules or systems as you manage your career finances that have seen a ton of success or that have seen a ton of failure?
I don't think so. I mean, again, we're in a very fortunate position. I always think long term.
Yep.
As a couple, we've had conversations about just acknowledging, the type of success that we've had in the past couple years and recognizing that nothing's guaranteed in the future.
Yep.
And then, so we are mindful of that. I've had the best year of my life financially for the past, I don't know.
Every year is outperforming
every
prior
year since 2015.
Okay. And so will 2023 be larger than 2022?
Well, it was.
It was. Yeah, that's what
2024. I mean, you mentioned I've done over 150 million downloads in our 5 years.
Yep.
We did almost 60 million last year.
60 million.
And to put that into perspective, Bachelor Rush Hour, my podcast, last year, my first year, did about 1 million downloads, which, by the way, I'm incredibly blessed to have. Absolutely. So for 60 million, I mean, that's a behemoth. That's really big. It just goes to show in the podcasting world, which operates a little differently from YouTube. In the podcasting world, you continue to rise the ranks on the charts, and I believe it's exponential growth. So just to show you guys how it all works here, if we go to chartable.com, you can do this, and you can type in any podcast here. So if we type in Bachelor Rush Hour, you'll see to get in the top 200 of society and culture is a really big deal. We just went up 21 today, and it goes up and down based on new subscribers. But if you're not in the top 200, people really can't find you. That's why rating and reviewing is so important, because it keeps on pushing you up the charts. Now, if you look at Viall Files podcast, I mean, it's going to be massive. So he's number 23 in all podcasts in the U.S. So in society and culture, he's number 4. So if him and I were, say, to be compared within society and culture, I'm 203 and he's number 4. I mean, and by the way, anyone in the top 200 is doing a good thing, and we couldn't do it without your audience. I don't know if he hits on that, but I'm going to hit on that right now, how impressive that is. Now, if we go to Trading Secrets, which is Jason Tartick's, he's also grown a bunch, but he's in a different market. Some subcategories are different than others. We used to be in relationships, and we were like a top 2 or 3. We were very big in relationships, but it wasn't the same market as society and culture. I don't know why Trading Secrets isn't popping up. Society and culture is very big. Either I don't see it here. Okay, so let's just keep moving on. We'll check that out later.
Wow. So we've had, do the math there, and in 1 out of our 5 years, we did over a third of our downloads.
Holy shit.
So, but we'll see. I'm hoping for 100 mil this year.
100.
So my guess, 100 million would give him about $10 million, maybe double that, but in that dollar range for revenue.
Million downloads is the goal. Yeah. And are you going to increase episode output to get there, or stay at the same?
Right now, no.
Okay.
All right, so let's move it forward to 4750, and that's where he talks about the prenup here. But very interesting stuff, as always, when you talk about finance, because people don't want to talk about it. And I'll tell you why. There's a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of weaponization that happens when you share your information. I've been very open about the abundance that has been created from my podcast and what I do. And I've also talked a lot about the Marianne Williamson book, The Law of Divine Compensation, which says if someone wants to donate and join my Patreon, I'm not going to stop them. Patreon.com/Dave Neal. That's where I share all of my financial information. Oh, here's where the podcast is doing this month. Here's what, last month we had made this amount of money. But what I've noticed is while that inspires some, for different personality types, it can lead others to envy. It's not about envy. It's about showing what's possible when you take the equity, when you don't work for somebody else. So like, I talk about, 2 years ago when Nick was flirting with the idea of, telling me, oh, Dave, I'm going to be starting a podcast network. Maybe you'd have a fit over here. Well, I was like, oh, cool. Yeah. I would have never considered that because I'd rather work for myself and make 10% of the money because then I have ownership over it. So Nick knows that. That's why he doesn't have, that's why he's not a Bachelor happy hour podcast host. He gets to control his destiny.
To get there.
Okay. I'm going to throw a number. You could say above, below, or you can say GFY. GFY means myself. 3 million annual revenue for your podcast, above, below, or GFY?
I'm going to go GFY.
Okay. How about 1.5 million?
I'm going to go GFY.
Okay. Like I said, I think he's at about 6 to 8 million this past year revenue on his podcast.
Okay. I'm getting a good GFY.
What did
Last year, 2 years ago, I asked you. It was 750 and you said above. Yeah.
Which, by the way, shows how much Caitlin Bristow is probably making with Off the Vine podcast because Caitlin Bristow has only 1 or 2 employees. Nick has 8.
Well, I mean,
I think
guess we could
once you get past that number, so to speak, I don't think there's any upside into
sharing the number.
Sharing.
Okay. And also there isn't much upside because then you have employees that want to raise, they start doing the math, and it becomes a whole thing. But like I said with me, when somebody else started a GoFundMe for me for my legal issues that I have here with this lawsuit I'm a part of, some people, very small amount, but some people got very upset. Dave, you say here that you make this amount of money. How come you need people to donate to you? I don't. But I'm okay letting people donate to me. But I've seen that through the GoFundMes for Clayton and for myself, people go, oh, Dave, you bought a house. How could you let someone else donate? Well, I let people give me gifts. And this is a point of contention I have with my wife where everyone's asking us when we're going to have a baby registry because people want to buy us a pillow or a thing or that. And she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to do it because she doesn't want... I don't know. She doesn't want to have to deal with the haters that are out there, even though 99% of people are not haters. It's a very interesting topic to discuss when it comes to money because it has the ability to be the root of all evil, but at the same time, money can be the thing that injects life force into your podcast. Like we're able to design a whole new studio, which we're going to be building in here because we have a little bit more capital. That's a good thing. That helps out the consumer. You get a better product. It's not bad audio. It's not this, So, how we frame, how we discuss money can change the amount of money we can see in our own lives. I've worked minimum wage jobs. I've worked union jobs. I've worked blue collar construction jobs. I've worked corporate jobs. And the only thing I can tell you right now is I never want to work for anyone else. And not everyone has that opportunity to do that. But more people now can do that than ever before.
Okay, that's good. All right.
Again, I think you're getting into attracting the wrong attention conversations.
Okay, I see. You get the attention from that.
So Nick says by sharing money, it attracts the wrong conversation. Jason's going to be defensive because he's going to, or maybe not defensive, that's not the right word, but his whole podcast is about having that conversation about financial literacy, financial transparency. I think while it may attract some haters, it's also like when Joe Rogan signed his Spotify contract for $100 million to license his show for 2 years. That was when people, you can't hide behind that. That was out there. That's how much he was making a year. And you know what? Bob Iger makes the same amount to be a CEO for Disney. There's a lot of money being thrown out there in the media world and advertising. But Jason, what he's doing is not about attracting the wrong conversation. It's about showing what's possible. And I think that's inspiring. I get a dopamine rush when I hear Jason Tartick interview somebody who's quote unquote made it. That's inspiring to me. On this week's episode of Driving with Dave, I interviewed my wife, and it was us driving across the country talking about going from essentially not making any money on YouTube 3 years ago to now buying a home with that. To the right audience, that's inspiring.
But I think it also is inspiration for a lot of people out there.
I
see 2 years ago.
I hope people feel very inspired by my success.
Right?
I mean, listen, I'm kidding. I've been able to do a lot of dream come true things with what I've been able to accomplish with this show. First, buying my grandfather's lake house back and bringing it back into my family.
That's pretty cool.
Being able to support my parents,
Yeah.
In the twilight of their life. I mean, hopefully not the twilight, but they've given me so much of their life and sacrificed so much for their kids, and to be able to give back to them is incredibly rewarding feeling, and to be able to support my family and do the things that I get to do. I feel very lucky and privileged that I get to do that, and
sure.
I'm very grateful for that. So hopefully that is inspiring.
That is inspiring. I think that's really inspiring. But I do think, like, if you look at the mechanics of business, there's a point where revenue comes in that you can afford to reinvest in people. Especially, like, you have people that are living in LA. Like, you have a lot, 7, 8 people. That's a big dollar amount you're paying. At $750K of revenue, it gets a little tighter when you have 8 people on the payroll. You know what I mean? So they're also, I think, with all businesses.
Well, here, I'll give you this number. I'm spending more than that number you asked last time.
Interesting. Okay, so there you go. And I think, let's use this as education. You're spending that amount to reinvest into your business. And so people out there that are starting businesses, put that in perspective as you scale, because you can't scale without reinvesting. You can't.
I mean, it's funny. My uncle, who he consults on the side. He's fine, but he does my books for me, because he has the time for it, doesn't need to do it. And it's just fun to have, like, someone in the family, who you can trust, help with your money.
Yeah.
And I just remember as a kid, as a young entrepreneur, he always told me most entrepreneurs don't reinvest in their business.
Yep.
And a lot of people, you'll have the houses and the boats and all this shit, and their businesses don't grow, and they eventually die.
Yep. Exactly.
And so that's just something I took to heart.
Yeah.
And, I want to keep growing, and I'm doing just fine in terms of the life I get to live and the things I get to do.
Yeah.
And I don't need to be driving a G-Wagon.
Yeah.
For
sure.
And I'd rather invest that in another editor.
Yep. I love it.
And another, or another qualified employee who can maybe bring in an idea or, make a dramatic sizzle that, entices another big name guest to want to do my show.
I love it. That's working. You don't need a G-Wagon when you got a professional editor putting those types of clips out. It's incredible. A couple more things I got to ask you. Talk about this revenue. This is educational. This is good drama. It's not bad drama. You could also tell me to GFY. Do you have a take on prenups?
Yeah, I think they're great. Or I think they're
okay,
totally
so you're
fine.
pro prenup then?
Yeah, I mean, like, marriage nowadays, it's not what it used to be.
No.
And again, prenup with the idea that, the assets you come into the marriage are your assets.
Yep.
And things that you do together as a couple can be and there's exceptions to every rule, but, like, if someone's against that on its own, then why?
Yeah.
And in Nick's scenario, he's got quite an amount of years in the game over his wife. So the properties, the value, the assets of what he has from his pre-Natalie world are probably substantial. And, if they were to break up in 2 years, does she deserve half of that? I would probably say no. If you're coming into a marriage kind of like I am, where neither party really has much in the sense of substantial assets, or ours were virtually on the same level, then I think you treat your marriage as team building, and what you create during your marriage is split equally if, God forbid, something happens. But yeah, the prenuptial agreement, the idea of that is obviously is a tough one, because Nick here in his response does a good job of explaining what a prenup is. So it doesn't look bad. I mean, it is still something that will generate clicks, here. And he knows that from the business side of things, talking about a prenup. But at the same time, now, obviously, whatever money he and his wife make while they have a family and while they're married, that I do believe they're going to split that if, in fact, something ever happened, which, of course, we would never hope for anybody. We want, long, happy, loving families and all of that. But if Natalie, say, takes her dominant money earning years, her 20s, her 30s, her 40s, and is raising kids and taking care of a lot of the emotional and physical labor of managing a family while Nick gets to go podcast and make a ton of money. I think we can all agree, my audience I'm sure is nodding their head here, that she's as valuable as whatever sales money he brings in, because because he wouldn't be able to do what he's doing if she wasn't you know what I mean? So anyway, interesting stuff. As always, if you want to hear more conversation about where my podcast is, I'd be happy to share it with you. I'm an open book. I've just decided to give that information to the Patreon because I've watched in the last few months as people have taken what I've shared, and I've shared it not for braggadocio, but for inspiration. I'm in a bunch of podcasting communities and I say, hey, guess what? If you use this platform and do this X, Y, and Z, you can actually make a living. I mean, my nut was so low for what I needed to do to stop working my previous job. I said, if I can make $500 a week, I can quit my other job. And then if you quit that other job, where do you go from there? And it has gone nothing but skyrocketing upwards. I truly encourage people to think of what you can do financially and what you can do to provide control over your destiny as a positive, and don't look at others like Nick. And again, all of my criticisms of Nick are basically how he's handled discussions of mental health. What I believe is akin to plagiarism, which is deleting my name. His take on Katie Thurston and sharing DMs and F-boys, Blakes. I mean, all of those takes are just, I think he has bad takes on those. That's all. As a person, I think he's calculated, but I think most people are. And I think he's trying his best. I have no ill will towards him, believe it or not. And I think it's very interesting how he runs his business. I personally I don't want to run my business the way he runs his, because expansion isn't everyone's goal. And I think he would agree with this. Like for me, it's about creating enough time and space to do other creative things that I like to do. Stand-up comedy. I would much rather earn my money making people laugh and having stand-up shows. I absolutely love the conversations I have with audience after I go on shows and meet and greets and things like that. I get so much more joy out of those human connections than I do being alone in my room talking to you. But this isn't a bad second place by all means. So I've worked with comedians who hire too many people and then they just become a boss. I don't know. I wouldn't say Nick's not creative, but I would say he leans more on a business sense than a creative sense. And for me as a creative, I don't want to become 3 or 4 other people's boss where I have to do quarterly, reviews and wonder if they're worth the money. Oh my gosh, I get anxiety thinking of that. I much prefer being of a sort of a Joe Rogan type, which is very small on the actual team he works with, very sort of, very sort of like easy to kind of do what he does without having this giant overhead. Nick's going for something different. Hey, power to him. All right. Well, we'll be back with more content. It looks like I'm getting my internet today, which is going to be great. When the new internet arrives, I've been making content off of my dang T-Mobile, God bless it. When the new internet arrives at my new home, I will have a nice Patreon live stream for you guys. I miss you, and I'll see you all out there. That should be later this morning. The internet's supposed to arrive within 40 minutes. I've been looking out the window for it. So either way, hang tight for that. Patreon.com/Dave Neal. We'll be back right after this.